Is there any difference between content manipulation by a non-U.S. company as opposed to a U.S. company? I didn't hear Mr. Fisher make a distinction between the two.
Yes, and I think the important thing to recognize is that the act here is targeting covert content manipulation by a foreign adversary nation. Now, I understand my friends to say—
What difference does that make?
The difference is that there is no protected First Amendment right for a foreign adversary to exploit its control over a speech platform.
The difference between covert and non-covert.
So I think that Congress's concern with the covert operation was that a foreign adversary could effectively weaponize this platform behind the scenes in order to achieve any number of geopolitical goals. Here are some of the examples that come to mind. One of the pages out of the playbook here is for a foreign adversary to simply try to get Americans arguing with one another to create chaos and distraction in order to weaken the United States as a general matter and distract from any activities that the foreign adversary might want to conduct on the world stage.
What do you mean by covert, though? I mean, does covert just mean it's hard to figure out how the algorithm works? Because we could say that about every algorithm.
No, the covert nature of it comes from the fact that it's not apparent that the PRC is the one behind the scenes pulling the strings here and deciding exactly what content is going to be made to appear on the site. And another way that the
It's just because we don't know that China's behind it? That's what covert means?
Well, I think that
it doesn't have anything to do with the difficulty of figuring out what the algorithm is doing. It's just because people don't know that China is pulling the strings. That's what covert means?
What it means is that Americans are on this platform thinking that they are speaking to one another, and this recommendation engine that is apparently so valuable is organically directing their speech to each other. And what is covert is that the PRC, a foreign adversary nation, is instead exploiting a vulnerability in the system.
Well, if that's all it means, that like people don't know that China's behind it, like everybody now knows that China is behind it.
No, but it's the specific content that's being manipulated would be unapparent. And so I think
that's true of every search engine. I mean, you can take any of these algorithms, whether it's X or whether it's, you name it. What are the new ones? Blue Sky? I mean, none of these are apparent, right? You get what you get, and you think, that's puzzling. And it's all a little bit of a black box. So you can't just mean it's a black box, it's covert. They're all black boxes. And if you just mean what's covert is the fact that there's China behind it, I mean, honestly, really, like everybody does know now that there's China behind it. So I just don't get what this covert word does for you.
I think the problem with just saying as a general matter, China has this capability and might at some point be able to exercise it and manipulate the platform is it doesn't put anyone on notice of when that influence operation is actually happening, and therefore it doesn't guard against the national security harm from the operation itself.
Isn't that a pretty paternalistic point of view? I mean, don't we normally assume that the best remedy for problematic speech is counter speech? And TikTok says it could even live with a disclaimer on its website saying this can be covertly manipulated by China. In case anybody were left in doubt after today about that possibility. So you're saying that won't work because? That
won't work because it is such a generic, generalized disclosure that it wouldn't put anyone reasonably on notice about when it's actually happening. And the example I've been thinking about is—
That's your best argument, is that the average American won't be able to figure out that the cat feed he's getting on TikTok could be manipulated, even though there's a disclosure saying it could be manipulated.
But imagine if you walked into a store and it had a sign that said, one of 1 million products in this store causes cancer. That is not going to put you on notice about what product is actually jeopardizing your health. And I think that's roughly equivalent to the type of disclosure they're contemplating here. They brought up the example of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA. There you have to disclose the actual content.
If that's true, then wouldn't that be true for all social media companies, for all content? I mean, every editor, every newspaper in its editorial room makes decisions about what it's going to run and how it's going to say it. And every algorithm has preferences, whether it's domestic or foreign. And nobody really knows exactly when those editorial decisions are being made or how. But they're generally aware, and we think that's enough.
I think, though, that there is a real risk that when a foreign adversary has control of that kind of mechanism and a speech platform in the United States, it could weaponize that platform to harm United States interests. And one of the key ways that the PRC flexes this muscle is to suppress speech.
General, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're not arguing about the compelling interest. We're arguing about the tailoring.
Right. And so I guess what I would say, you began by saying the cure for concerning speech is counter speech. Here, I dispute the premise that Congress was specifically concerned about any particular subject or any particular viewpoint. It wanted to close off a capability of a foreign government. But in any event, it's very hard to engage in counter speech when you don't know because someone is secretly manipulating the platform behind the scenes. And in particular, what the PRC has the capability to do is simply silence American voices.
Wouldn't the same thing be true with a newspaper owned by a foreign company and a foreign government? You wouldn't know when it's exercising editorial discretion about this article or that article or how it's doing it, so maybe we just need to shut down the Oxford University Press in America, or you pick it, any other foreign-owned Politico, I was told today, is owned by Germany.
So
that would all be okay on your theory, so long as Congress designates that country a foreign adversary?
We are not asking the court to articulate bright-line rules to govern all kinds of hypothetical situations.
I am testing your argument.
Yes, and what I want to acknowledge is that sometimes the court has recognized that a speaker-based preference might reflect a content-based preference. And in the context of ownership of a newspaper, for example, in part because a newspaper is a one-way channel of communication and is generally understood to represent to some extent its publisher's views, maybe the court would more readily infer that a regulation targeting that is actually aiming to target content. But I don't think the court could draw the same conclusion here.
I'm not talking about the compelling interest or any of that. I'm talking about the tailoring. And you're saying we have no alternative but to stop this speech altogether. We can't rely on disclosure. But you say that wouldn't apply to Politico or to the Oxford University Press because?
In the circumstance where you have a newspaper that is understood to reflect its publisher's views, then you might think that disclosure would be a more adequate remedy there because it's not just holding itself out as a forum for speech between other people. I think social media platforms do raise distinct interests in this regard because what people think when they're engaging with TikTok is that it's organically feeding them videos based on the recommendation engine. And if actually China is behind the scenes engaging in this kind of covert operation, it does prevent a distinct national security risk. Of course, the other big difference with a newspaper is it's not likely to be collecting sensitive personal information about 170 million plus people and then having the capacity to send that back to a foreign adversary.
General Preleger,